I am Julian. I am 28 years old. Last Tuesday afternoon, my own flesh and blood, my older brother, slapped me hard across the face in the middle of a high-end luxury watch boutique. He did it right under the blinding glare of imported crystal chandeliers. He did it right in front of the horrified boutique staff. He did it right in front of his wealthy, high-society fiancée. I was just standing there, minding my own business, finally spending my own hard-earned salary on something nice for myself after years of grinding in the dark. He barged in, looked at me with absolute, unfiltered disgust, called me a pathetic shadow, and struck me. He truly thought he had the ultimate power in that room. He thought he could humiliate me in public, break my spirit, and put me back in my place, just like our parents had done behind closed doors for my entire 28 years of existence on this earth. But there was one massive thing my brother did not know. He did not know that the tall, incredibly elegant woman standing just a few feet away, quietly browsing a velvet display case of diamond-encrusted dials, was Victoria. She was a tech billionaire. She was a woman whose commercial real estate portfolio alone could buy his entire life, his fake businesses, and our parents' house 100 times over without making a dent in her bank account. And when she saw his hand strike my face, she stepped forward. The temperature in the room plummeted. Her voice was like absolute ice, cutting through the silence of the boutique. She looked my brother dead in the eye, pointed a perfectly manicured finger at his chest, and said, "Touch my husband again and see what happens." My brother completely froze. The arrogant, entitled smirk melted off his face instantly. He stammered, his jaw dropping open, his face turning completely pale as the blood drained from his cheeks. He realized the sheer magnitude of the mistake he had just made. He realized he had just assaulted a man in front of a billionaire who was claiming me as her own. And right now, my family is begging for my forgiveness. Their lives entirely flipped upside down, drowning in the consequences of their own toxic actions. Before I tell you exactly how we got to that explosive moment, and the absolute brutal, legal, and financial revenge that followed, hit that like button if you believe that justice always comes for the wicked. And do not forget to let me know what city or state you are watching from today in the comments below. I always read them, and I love seeing where my supporters are located. Now, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let us go back to where this entire nightmare truly started. The boutique was dead silent. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that actually rings in your ears. I could hear the faint, meticulous ticking of hundreds of mechanical masterpieces enclosed in their pristine, polished glass displays. My right cheek was burning with a fierce, radiating heat. I could feel the exact outline of Preston's hand imprinted on my skin, throbbing in time with my racing heartbeat. For a split second, the entire world just stopped spinning. The air felt thick. Preston was staring at Victoria, completely paralyzed by the sheer, unadulterated authority radiating from her posture. Preston was a man who worshipped money. He worshipped high society status. He built his entire fragile personality around the grand illusion of wealth. And standing directly in front of him, blocking his path to me, was a woman who possessed more actual, tangible power than he could ever comprehend in multiple lifetimes. Her tailored designer suit was immaculate. Her gaze was piercing. She did not yell. She did not scream. She simply spoke with the quiet, terrifying volume of someone who could ruin your entire life with a single phone call. I stood there, looking at my brother, the golden child, the one who got everything handed to him on a silver platter from the moment he took his first breath. This slap was not just about a luxury watch. It was never about the watch. It was 28 years of deep-seated resentment, suffocating entitlement, and relentless psychological abuse concentrated into a single violent physical blow. It was the absolute physical manifestation of how my entire family viewed me. I was nothing to them. I was just the shadow. I was the punching bag they used to make themselves feel taller, the dumping ground for all their insecurities. As Victoria's private security detail stepped into the main showroom, their dark suits and earpieces signaling that this situation was about to escalate drastically, the boutique manager rushed over. He was an older man, dressed in a sharp pinstripe suit, and he had a look of pure, unadulterated panic on his face. He knew exactly who Victoria was. He knew her net worth, and he knew a violent altercation in his high-end store could ruin his career and the store's pristine reputation. I watched all of this unfold like I was having an out-of-body experience. The classical music playing softly from the hidden speakers seemed to mock the absolute chaos unfolding on the marble floor. In that precise moment, standing under those bright lights with the sting of betrayal on my face, I realized something fundamental had shifted deep inside my chest. A chain had finally snapped. The old Julian, the one who would have lowered his head, apologized for causing a scene, taken the blame, and desperately tried to keep the peace to protect the fragile family image, died right there on that polished floor. I was entirely done being the victim. I was done shrinking my personality, hiding my intelligence, and burying my ambitions just so my older brother could take up all the space in the room. To understand why a simple purchase of a luxury watch and a wild case of mistaken identity from a tech billionaire shattered 28 years of total darkness, we have to rewind the clock. We have to go back to the deep, toxic, rotting roots of a family dynamic that was specifically designed to break my spirit and keep me entirely subservient. The storm you just witnessed in that boutique was only the beginning. It was just the opening thunderclap. I had absolutely no idea how massive the wreckage was going to be, or how many lives were going to be completely dismantled by the time Sunday dinner rolled around. Growing up in my household meant learning the unspoken rules of a highly rigged game very early on. My parents, Diana and Richard, had a very clear, unwavering vision of their family legacy, and the sole heir to that legacy was named Preston. Preston was 2 years older than me, but in the hierarchy of our suburban home, he might as well have been a royal prince living in an entirely different universe. Our house was comfortable. We lived in a nice neighborhood with a strict homeowners association, manicured lawns, and 2 cars in the driveway. We were not financially struggling by any stretch of the imagination, but the resources, the affection, the patience, and the opportunities were distinctly and cruelly divided down an invisible line. I remember the exact day Preston turned 16. A shiny, brand new SUV appeared in the driveway with a massive red velvet bow stuck to the hood. It was his grand reward for maintaining a completely average, highly unimpressive academic record. He had solid C grades, a terrible attitude, and a nasty habit of sneaking out of his bedroom window on weekends. But my parents looked at him with blind adoration. They called him a free spirit. They said he just needed the right motivation, and a new car would teach him responsibility. Exactly 2 years later, when I turned 16, there was no car. There was no bow. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table, handed me a thick stack of paper job applications for local retail stores, and told me it was time to build character. My father looked me in the eye and said hard work was the only way I would ever amount to anything. So I worked late nights at a massive local grocery store. I wore a scratchy polyester uniform. I spent my weekends stocking heavy cardboard boxes of canned goods until midnight, wiping down aisles, and dealing with angry customers just to buy my own winter coat and pay for my own school supplies. I watched Preston drive off to parties in the car my parents bought him, using gas money my parents gave him, while I stood in the freezing rain waiting for the city bus. When it was time for college, the disparity became a gaping, undeniable chasm. My parents voluntarily liquidated a massive portion of their long-term investments. They even dipped into their own 401k retirement accounts to ensure Preston went to an expensive, out-of-state private university completely debt-free. They wanted him to network with the elite. They wanted him to have the true, unburdened college experience. They threw him a massive going-away party, inviting all the neighbors and family friends to brag about his bright future. A year later, when my acceptance letter to a highly prestigious, incredibly competitive architecture program arrived in the mail, I ran into the living room, my heart pounding with pure joy. I handed the thick envelope to my mother. She opened it, looked at the tuition cost printed on the second page, sighed heavily, and slid the paper back across the coffee table to me. She did not smile. She did not say congratulations. She looked at me with cold practicality and told me we simply could not afford it. She said the college fund was entirely depleted from Preston's tuition, and I needed to be realistic about my station in life. She suggested I look into a local community college or perhaps just pick up more shifts at the grocery store. I refused to give up my dream. I spent the next 4 years working full-time at a hardware store during the day while taking exhausting, brutal night classes. I ground my bones into absolute dust to earn my architecture degree, surviving on cheap ramen noodles and 4 hours of sleep a night, while simultaneously drowning in crippling federal student loans. But the true architect of this massive familial divide was not just my parents. It was my Aunt Beatrice. Beatrice was my mother's older sister. She was a woman who possessed a sweet, perfectly practiced Southern smile and a heart full of absolute, unfiltered venom. She lived 2 towns over, was the president of her local HOA, and loved nothing more than stirring the pot. She had a son the exact same age as Preston, and she treated my brother like an extension of her own golden child. But for some inexplicable reason, she despised me from the moment I could form full sentences. At every single Thanksgiving dinner, every Christmas morning, every family gathering, Beatrice would sit in the kitchen with my mother, sipping expensive imported wine and whispering pure poison. I would walk past the doorway, carrying plates to the dining room, and hear her crisp, judging voice cutting through the air. She would say things like, "Julian is so calculating, Diana. You really need to watch out for that boy. He is entirely too quiet. He does not have Preston's warm, generous heart. You can tell he is just waiting to take advantage of your finances." My mother, who idolized her older sister, absorbed every single word of that toxic narrative. Over time, Beatrice's whispers became my parents' concrete reality. I was painted as the cold, ungrateful burden who always had a dark ulterior motive. Preston was the sensitive, brilliant star who just needed a little more financial help, a little more funding, a little more grace. Whenever Preston failed a college class, crashed his car, or got fired from a summer job, it was the world being unfair to him. It was a bad professor, a slick road, a jealous boss. Whenever I achieved something, like making the dean's list or landing an internship, it was treated with deep suspicion or completely ignored. I swallowed the blinding unfairness because I believed the lie every unloved child tells themselves to survive the night. I believed that once I became highly successful, once I proved my undeniable worth to the world, they would finally see me. I was incredibly, dangerously wrong. Fast forward to my late 20s. I was working as a senior interior designer and architect at a high-end, highly competitive boutique firm in the heart of the city. I was pouring 60 to 70 hours a week into my job. I designed luxury commercial spaces for massive corporate clients. I was exceptionally good at what I did. I had a unique vision, a relentless work ethic forged in the fires of my childhood, and a desperate, burning need to secure a financial future where I never had to rely on a single human being for anything. But my direct boss, a man named Gregory, was a master psychological manipulator. Gregory was a guy who wore perfectly tailored Italian suits, played golf with wealthy corporate clients on Tuesday afternoons, drove a leased sports car he could barely afford, and took absolute, brazen credit for every single late-night rendering and complex blueprint I ever produced. For 6 grueling, exhausting months, I worked relentlessly on a massive pitch for a new corporate headquarters downtown. It was the project that was supposed to secure my promotion to junior partner. It was the project that would finally bring the massive bump in my salary I desperately needed to pay off the last crippling chunk of my student loans. I sacrificed my weekends. I sacrificed my sleep. I had absolutely zero personal life. I lived on black coffee and adrenaline. On the morning of the final presentation to the client board, Gregory pulled me into his glass-walled office. He put on a face of fake concern. He told me there was a massive clerical error with our zoning permits, and I needed to stay at the office to handle the urgent paperwork. He told me he would take my pitch deck, my designs, my entire 6 months of life, and present it to the board himself to save the deal. I trusted him. I stayed behind. He went to the meeting, used my exact speaking notes, claimed my designs as his own brainchildren, and landed a multimillion-dollar contract. When he returned to the office that afternoon, the senior partners threw a lavish champagne celebration for him in the main conference room. I watched from my small cubicle as they toasted to his sheer genius, his innovative vision, his brilliant use of space. Later that afternoon, Gregory pulled me aside near the office break room. He clapped me hard on the shoulder, gave me a sickeningly patronizing smile, and said, "Great job formatting those PowerPoint slides, Julian. You are a real team player. We will talk about a small gift card bonus at the end of the quarter." I felt physically sick. My stomach dropped into a bottomless, black pit. The rage I had been suppressing for years, not just at Gregory, but at my parents, at Aunt Beatrice, at Preston, started boiling over like a pot left on a high flame. My coworker and only close friend at the firm, a guy named Felix, saw the whole exchange. Later that evening, over a couple of cheap beers at a sticky dive bar down the street, Felix looked at me with deep, genuine concern. He slammed his beer bottle down on the wooden table and said, "You have to leave that place, Julian. You are letting Gregory treat you like a complete doormat. You are a brilliant architect. You did the work of 3 men on that project. But you carry yourself like you deserve to be punished. You need to respect yourself before anyone else in this city ever will." Felix was entirely right. I had spent my entire adult life waiting for validation from people who were deeply committed to misunderstanding me and exploiting my labor. My parents, my aunt, and now my boss. I went home to my small apartment that night, sat on my cheap couch and opened my laptop. I checked my bank account. Despite everything, despite the loans and the insultingly low salary Gregory kept me on, I had saved a substantial amount of money. I lived incredibly frugally, drove a 10-year-old car, and never went on vacation. My savings had quietly grown into a very healthy, substantial sum. I decided right then and there that I was going to do something completely, wildly out of character. I was going to stop waiting for someone else to hand me a reward I had already earned. I was going to stop being the shadow. I was going to buy myself a physical symbol of my own undeniable worth. I was going to buy a luxury watch I had been admiring through a fortified storefront window for 2 solid years. It was an impulsive, radical decision. It was an act of silent, powerful rebellion against a world that constantly told me I was not enough. I had absolutely no idea that this simple act of financial self-care was going to detonate a nuclear bomb in the middle of my life. I thought the decision would bring me a moment of peace. I was about to walk directly into a Category 5 hurricane. The very next afternoon, I took an extended lunch break. I completely ignored the stack of Gregory's revisions sitting on my desk, walked out of the corporate building, and marched straight downtown to the luxury watch boutique. It was the kind of elite establishment that had a massive, stone-faced security guard at the heavy glass door. The interior smelled intensely of polished mahogany, rich leather, and immense, generational wealth. The lighting was perfectly calibrated to make the diamonds and brushed stainless steel gleam like stars in the night sky. I was wearing a simple, off-the-rack navy button-down shirt and standard gray slacks. I fully expected to be completely ignored, sized up, or quietly judged by the high-end sales staff. I prepared myself for the usual condescension. Instead, a sales consultant named Clara approached me immediately. She had a warm, deeply genuine smile that reached her eyes. She did not judge my lack of a tailored Italian suit or the visible scuff marks on my leather shoes. I told her exactly which timepiece I was looking for, and we spent 30 minutes talking deeply about the craftsmanship. We discussed the intricate automatic movements, the sapphire crystal glass, and the rich, complex history of the brand. She treated me like a VIP. For the first time in a very long time, I felt genuinely respected. I felt like a human being with actual value, engaging in a financial transaction where my presence was honored and my knowledge was appreciated. I finally chose the beautiful, classic timepiece with a deep ocean blue dial. It was undeniably expensive. It was a significant portion of my hard-earned savings, but I had the cash in my checking account ready to go. Clara was at the mahogany register preparing the authentication paperwork and the warranty box. She offered me a glass of sparkling water on a silver tray. I took it, standing near the front display case, looking at my reflection in the polished glass, feeling a rare, profound moment of genuine, quiet peace. Then, the heavy glass door swung open with a violent, aggressive push. A loud, deeply obnoxious, grating laugh echoed through the quiet, refined store, shattering the atmosphere completely. It was Preston. He walked in flanked by his best friend, Derek, a guy who was essentially Preston's personal cheerleader and yes-man. And right beside them was Vanessa. Vanessa was Preston's wealthy fiancée. She came from old, established money. Her family owned a chain of car dealerships. She was the kind of woman who drove a sleek, roaring black Porsche 911, wore understated platinum jewelry that cost more than a suburban house, and carried designer bags that cost more than my first car. Preston was constantly, desperately trying to impress her and her family. He spent his days pretending he was a highly successful, self-made entrepreneur building a real estate empire. In absolute reality, he was still draining our parents' retirement accounts, taking out secret loans from Aunt Beatrice, and burning through cash to fund his failed, ridiculous tech startups that never made a single dime. Preston's eyes scanned the elegant room, presumably looking for a salesperson to bully, when his gaze locked directly onto me. His expression morphed instantly from performative, arrogant confidence to deep, visceral annoyance. "Julian, what on earth are you doing in a place like this?" he asked, his voice deliberately loud, designed to draw the attention of every single employee and customer in the store. Derek snickered quietly beside him, crossing his arms. Vanessa just looked at me with mild, detached curiosity, adjusting the strap of her purse. I took a slow, deep breath, anchoring my feet firmly to the floor. I kept my voice perfectly level, refusing to let him see my heart rate spike. "I am buying a watch." Preston let out a harsh, barking laugh that grated against the quiet atmosphere. He walked right up into my personal space, invading it entirely, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "Buying a watch? Here? What, are you putting a $5 down payment on a leather watch strap? Or did you come in here to ask if they need someone to clean the display cases? This place is completely out of your league, Julian. You are embarrassing yourself. Go back to whatever discount outlet mall you usually shop at before they call security on you for loitering." I did not look away. For the first time in 28 years of living in his suffocating, miserable shadow, I did not drop my gaze to the floor. I looked him dead in the eye, my face a mask of absolute calm. "I am paying in full, Preston. It is my money. I earned it working 60 hours a week. Now please take a step back and leave me alone. I am finishing my transaction." My sudden, unapologetic defiance caught him entirely off guard. The golden child was simply not used to the shadow talking back. He was used to me crumbling, apologizing, and running away. His face flushed a dark, angry, ugly red. The veins in his neck bulged. He realized Vanessa was standing right there, watching him intently, judging his ability to control the situation and assert his dominance as the alpha male. He needed to put me back in my place immediately. He needed to break me in front of his audience. "You pathetic, lying piece of trash," he hissed, pointing a finger directly in my face, his spit flying. "You are just trying to show off because you know Vanessa is here. You are trying to act like you are something you are not. You have always been deeply, obsessively jealous of me. You are jealous of my life, my success, my business, and my beautiful fiancée. You are nothing but a sad, miserable shadow trying to play dress-up in a rich man's store. You are a failure at your firm, and you are a failure as a man." The cruelty of his words hung in the air. But instead of breaking, I felt a strange, cold clarity wash over me. I am not jealous of a man who is 30 years old and still needs his mommy to pay his monthly credit card bill, I replied softly, my voice steady, cold, and loud enough for Vanessa to hear clearly. I am not jealous of a man whose businesses are entirely funded by our parents' stolen retirement funds. That was it. That was the absolute breaking point. The unfiltered, brutal truth shattered his fragile, carefully constructed ego into a million jagged pieces. Without a single second of hesitation, driven by pure narcissistic rage, Preston raised his hand and slapped me across the face with all his strength. The crack of skin on skin echoed through the boutique like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. Clara gasped loudly, dropping her expensive pen onto the marble floor. Derek stepped back rapidly, his eyes wide, suddenly realizing his friend had escalated things way too far into criminal territory. And that is exactly when the cold, deeply authoritative, terrifying voice cut through the heavy air from the back of the room. "Touch my husband again and see what happens." Victoria stepped out from the private VIP viewing room. She was wearing a perfectly tailored designer suit, projecting an aura of absolute, undeniable power. She walked directly toward us, her heels clicking sharply, methodically against the marble floor. Preston was paralyzed. He recognized her instantly. Anyone who read a financial magazine, watched the news, or worked in business in this city knew exactly who Victoria was. She looked directly at me. A brief flash of genuine confusion crossed her sharp eyes when she saw my face up close, realizing I was not her husband, Sebastian. We had the exact same athletic build, the same dark hair, the same profile from the back. But she did not miss a single beat. She did not falter. She saw the bright red handprint blooming on my face. She saw Preston's raised hand trembling slightly in the air. She saw a bully, the boutique manager, Mr. Montgomery, practically materialized out of thin air, sweating profusely, his face pale. "Is there a problem here, Ms. Victoria?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly under her intense gaze. "This pathetic excuse for a man just physically assaulted your customer," Victoria said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger directly at Preston's chest. "I suggest you remove him from the premises immediately before I have my personal legal team shut this entire city block down and drag your store into a massive lawsuit." Mr. Montgomery did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. He aggressively signaled the large security guard, Marcus. "Sir, I need you to leave the premises immediately. We have a strict zero-tolerance policy for violence in this establishment. Walk to the door right now, or I am calling the police and pressing charges for assault on our property." Preston desperately tried to recover his shattered dignity. He looked at Vanessa, his eyes wide, pleading for her to validate his status, to step in and save him with her family's name. "Vanessa, tell them who I am. Tell them this is just a misunderstanding with my younger brother. He provoked me." But Vanessa was staring at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. The grand illusion of the sophisticated, powerful, wealthy businessman was completely dead. She did not see a titan of industry. She saw a petulant, violent child throwing a pathetic tantrum in a high-end store over his own profound insecurities. Without saying a single word to him, without a single glance of sympathy, Vanessa turned on her expensive heel and walked purposefully out the door. Through the large front window, we watched her walk to her roaring black Porsche, get in, start the engine, and speed away into traffic, leaving Preston standing on the sidewalk looking like an absolute, abandoned fool. The storm had officially made landfall, and the destruction of my brother's fake life was absolutely glorious to witness. After the security guard physically escorted a highly embarrassed, sputtering Preston and a silent Derek out of the boutique, locking the door behind them, the silence in the room was deafening. Clara rushed over to me with a cold, damp cloth wrapped in a towel for my stinging cheek. She was apologizing profusely, her hands shaking, as if she had somehow personally caused the entire violent incident. I smiled gently and assured her I was perfectly fine, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I finished the transaction. My hands were shaking slightly as I signed the final receipt, but I did not stop. I strapped the heavy, beautiful, intricate watch onto my left wrist. It felt substantial, felt like armor. It was a solid, undeniable physical reminder that I had finally stood my ground, spoken my truth, and defended my own existence against the person who had terrorized me my whole life. Victoria was standing near the entrance, waiting patiently for me to finish. As I approached to thank her for stepping in, she offered a small, deeply apologetic smile that softened her sharp features. "I owe you a massive apology," she said, her voice entirely different from the icy, terrifying tone she had just used to verbally destroy Preston minutes ago. "From behind, you look exactly like my husband, Sebastian. He wears that exact same blue shirt, and he has your exact build." I reacted purely on instinct when I saw that man raise his hand to you. "I am deeply sorry for the confusion and for inserting myself so aggressively into your private family business." "You have absolutely nothing to apologize for," I replied sincerely, handing Clara the cold cloth back. "You saved me from dealing with a much uglier, messier situation. You stepped in to help a stranger when you did not have to. Thank you." She looked at me intently, studying my face, assessing my calm demeanor despite the red mark on my skin. "Let me buy you a cup of coffee. There is a very quiet, private artisan cafe just around the corner from here. They roast their own beans and the tables are secluded. It is the absolute least I can do to make up for the drama I just added to your day." I accepted. Sitting across from a self-made tech billionaire in a small, dimly lit coffee shop while rain began to gently tap against the window was incredibly surreal. But Victoria was incredibly grounded, highly intelligent, and intensely sharp. We ordered our coffees, and naturally, the conversation drifted away from the drama and toward careers and passions. I told her I was an architect and a senior interior designer specializing in large-scale commercial properties. Her eyes lit up instantly. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, and began asking me highly specific, complex questions about my design philosophy. She asked about my thoughts on integrating sustainable, eco-friendly materials into massive corporate spaces without losing aesthetic appeal. She asked for my vision on modern, collaborative workflow environments in a post-pandemic corporate world. I did not realize it at the time because my adrenaline was still slowly crashing, but I was in the middle of an intense, high-stakes stealth interview. I spoke passionately about my work. My ideas flowed freely, completely forgetting the stinging pain in my cheek and the family drama that had just occurred. I told her how physical space dictates human behavior, how poor lighting destroys employee morale, and how bad design ruins productivity and company culture. I laid out concepts I had been developing for years, concepts Gregory had always dismissed as too ambitious. Victoria listened intently, nodding slowly. Before we parted ways on the sidewalk outside the cafe, she reached into her expensive designer bag and handed me a sleek, thick, matte black business card with a single email address printed on it. "My company is acquiring a massive new commercial real estate portfolio next month," she said, looking me dead in the eye. "We are building 3 entirely new tech campuses across the state. I am not thrilled with our current design firm. They lack vision, they are entirely too safe, and they are overcharging me for mediocre blueprints. Send me your professional portfolio tonight, Julian. Send it directly to my personal email. Do not wait." I walked back to my apartment feeling like I had stepped into an entirely alternate dimension. The universe had taken a violent, deeply humiliating moment of public abuse and flipped it into the biggest, most monumental career opportunity of my entire life. When I finally unlocked the door to my small apartment that evening, the residual adrenaline completely faded, and harsh, toxic reality came crashing down. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen was completely lit up with notifications. I had 14 missed calls from my mother, 6 missed calls from my father, and dozens of frantic, angry, verbally abusive text messages from Preston. I did not answer a single one of them. I knew exactly what Preston had done. He had run straight home to mommy and daddy, tail tucked between his legs, to spin a fabricated, twisted narrative where he was the innocent victim of my sudden, unprovoked aggression, omitting the fact that his fiancée had dumped him on the sidewalk. But there was one specific voicemail from my mother that made my blood run completely cold. I sat on the edge of my bed, pressed play, and listened to her shrill, panicked, angry voice fill my quiet bedroom. "Julian, you need to call us immediately. Preston came over to the house and told us about the disgusting, humiliating scene you caused downtown today. He said you were buying fake, counterfeit watches to show off and embarrass him in front of Vanessa. He said you got him kicked out of a store. And frankly, Julian, we know you are completely out of your mind right now. Gregory called us yesterday. Your boss called your father, Julian. He told us you are on the verge of being fired for poor performance, laziness, and insubordination. He said your salary is about to be drastically cut. We are hosting a mandatory family dinner this Sunday. You will be there at 5 o'clock sharp, and you will sit down and listen to your brother's advice on how to fix your miserable, failing life. Do not embarrass this family further by ignoring this. I gripped the edge of my mattress until my knuckles turned completely white. Gregory, my boss, the man who had brazenly stolen my multimillion-dollar pitch, had actually taken the time to dig through my emergency contact file, call my parents, and lie to them. He painted me as a failing, incompetent, unstable employee. Why? Because he knew if I felt financially secure and confident, I would leave his firm and take my talent elsewhere. He was actively trying to manipulate my family into pressuring me to stay at my insultingly low salary, ensuring I felt too insecure and broken to ever quit. And my parents, deeply manipulated by Aunt Beatrice's lifelong campaign of hatred against me, believed a complete stranger instantly. They did not even call to ask for my side of the story. They were using my supposed professional failure to justify Preston's public violence against me. The puzzle pieces all clicked into place with horrifying, sickening clarity. The gaslighting, the financial control, the constant emotional beatdowns. They needed me to be a complete failure so Preston could look like a roaring success by comparison. They needed me to stay in the dark shadow so he could shine in the artificial light. I looked down at the beautiful, heavy new watch on my wrist. I thought about the extensive design portfolio I had just spent the last 2 hours polishing, combining all my original blueprints and emailing directly to Victoria's private server. I was not the same broken man who had woken up that morning. I took a deep, steadying breath, picked up my phone, and typed a single, perfectly calm text message to my mother. I will be there on Sunday. I was walking directly into the lion's den. I knew they were planning an ambush. I knew they wanted to break me down in front of Aunt Beatrice, Preston, and whoever else they had invited to witness my ultimate humiliation. But they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. I was preparing a massive, life-altering counterstrike, and they had absolutely no idea the level of hell I was about to rain down on their perfect, delusional family dinner. I thought the worst was over. I was so incredibly wrong. The drive to my parents' house that Sunday evening felt completely different from any other drive I had ever taken down that familiar, winding suburban highway. For the past decade, every single time I navigated my old, sputtering sedan toward their upscale neighborhood, my stomach would tie itself into a series of tight, painful knots. The anxiety would usually start creeping in miles before I even hit their city limits. I would spend the entire 40-minute commute desperately rehearsing apologies for things I had not even done yet. I would mentally prepare myself to be criticized, diminished, and pushed back into the darkest, quietest corner of the room. But this time was different. This time, my hands were entirely steady on the worn leather of the steering wheel. The heavy, beautiful luxury watch on my left wrist caught the amber glow of the passing streetlights. Felt like a piece of impenetrable, solid armor. I was not driving to a warm family dinner. I was walking onto a highly active battlefield, and for the very first time in my 28 years of existence, I was the one holding all the live ammunition. I pulled into the pristine, expansive driveway of their 2-story colonial house. The neighborhood was strictly governed by an overbearing homeowners association. That meant every single lawn was perfectly, obsessively manicured. Every hedge was trimmed to exact geometrical specifications, and there was a strict rule against parking cars on the street overnight. The entire street looked like a fabricated, artificial movie set designed to project wealth and stability. It was the absolute perfect visual metaphor for my family. Everything looked absolutely flawless and pristine on the outside, completely masking the deep, rotting, suffocating toxicity hidden behind the heavy oak front doors. I parked my 10-year-old car directly behind Preston's leased luxury SUV. I looked at his license plate, a customized vanity plate boasting his initials, and felt a wave of cold indifference wash over me. I took a deep breath of the crisp evening air, straightened the collar of my jacket, and walked up the front brick steps. I did not bother ringing the doorbell. I did not knock. I simply turned the heavy brass knob and walked straight into the grand foyer. The heavy, rich smell of my mother's traditional Sunday pot roast immediately hit me. It was a smell heavily associated with tense Thanksgiving dinners, forced family holidays, and endless hours of psychological warfare disguised as polite conversation. I could hear the sharp clinking of expensive crystal wine glasses and the low, murmuring hum of conversation coming from the formal dining room down the hall. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps completely muffled by the thick, imported Persian rug, and stepped into the arched doorway. The entire cast of my lifelong nightmare was already seated around the massive mahogany dining table. My mother, Diana, was seated at the foot of the table, wearing a strained, artificial smile and a pearl necklace she always wore when she wanted to project authority. My father, Richard, sat rigidly at the head of the table, looking stern and deeply disappointed. It was a look he had perfected specifically for me over the course of 2 decades. To his immediate right sat the golden child, my older brother, Preston. He had a smug, completely arrogant, punchable grin plastered across his face. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive tailored blazer, acting as though the violent, humiliating incident at the watch boutique had never happened. And sitting directly across from him, swirling a glass of deep red Merlot, was Aunt Beatrice. Her sharp, predatory eyes locked onto me the exact second I entered the room. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with his highly anticipated presence," Aunt Beatrice said. Her voice was dripping with that sickeningly sweet, passive-aggressive tone she always used to mask her absolute, unfiltered hatred for me. "Julian, honey, you look entirely exhausted. Your posture is terrible. Are you not sleeping well? Or is the stress of your little job finally catching up to you? I always told your mother you did not have the stamina for the corporate world." I did not take the bait. I did not look at the floor. I walked over to the only empty chair left at the table, the one shoved awkwardly near the swinging kitchen door, and sat down. I looked her dead in the eye. "I am sleeping perfectly fine, Aunt Beatrice. Thank you for your deep, unwavering concern regarding my health." My father cleared his throat loudly, resting his heavy forearms heavily on the polished mahogany table. "Let us not waste any precious time with empty pleasantries," he said, his voice dropping an octave to establish absolute dominance in the room. "Julian, we are extremely disturbed by the phone call we received from your boss, Gregory, earlier this week. He took time out of his incredibly busy schedule to call me directly. He told me you are on the absolute verge of being terminated. He said your performance is abysmal, your attitude is highly insubordinate, and your salary is going to be severely reduced pending a final review. We warned you. We warned you for years that choosing an artsy career like architecture over a solid business degree like your brother was a massive, life-altering mistake. Now you are facing the consequences of your own stubbornness." And on top of that, my mother chimed in, her voice rising in pitch, her hands fluttering nervously. "Preston told us exactly what happened downtown. He told us you were loitering in a high-end luxury store, causing a massive, embarrassing scene, and trying to buy counterfeit merchandise just to embarrass him in front of Vanessa. Julian, we raised you to have much better morals than this. You are acting entirely unhinged. You are acting like a desperate man. Gregory told us you did not even show up for work yesterday. Are you having a mental breakdown?" I looked directly at Preston. He was taking a slow, deliberate sip of his red wine, hiding his satisfied smirk behind the crystal rim of the glass. He had completely, masterfully rewritten history. He had painted himself as the innocent victim of my supposed public meltdown. He did not mention that he verbally abused me. He did not mention that he slapped me hard across the face. He certainly did not mention that Vanessa drove away in her Porsche and abandoned him on the sidewalk in absolute disgust. He was banking on the fact that I would stay silent, that I would absorb the blame just to keep the peace, just like I had done every single day of my childhood. "Is that the exact story you told them, Preston?" I asked calmly, keeping my voice perfectly level. I reached forward for my water glass, making absolutely sure the cuff of my shirt pulled back just enough for the heavy, authentic luxury watch to catch the bright light of the chandelier overhead. Preston's eyes darted aggressively to the watch. His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second, a flash of pure panic crossing his features, but he quickly recovered his arrogant, impenetrable facade. I told them the absolute, undeniable truth, Julian. You are a complete failure, and you are acting out because you are deeply, pathologically jealous of my success. It is pathetic. You need serious psychological help. You need to get down on your knees and beg Gregory to keep you on the payroll, even if it means sweeping the floors of his office. Maybe I can lend you some money for therapy once my new real estate deal closes. Preston is absolutely right, Aunt Beatrice interjected rapidly, leaning forward over the table like a starving vulture smelling fresh blood. You have always been so bitter, Julian. You carry this dark cloud over you. You need to look at your older brother as a shining example of how a real man handles his business and his life. Preston is building an empire from the ground up. In fact, you should be taking extensive notes tonight. You might actually learn how the real world operates. My father nodded in enthusiastic, blind agreement. Exactly, Beatrice. We invited you here tonight, Julian, not just to reprimand you for your terrible behavior, but to show you what real, tangible success looks like in the flesh. Preston has arranged a highly exclusive, private meeting. A massive angel investor is coming to our house tonight. Right here to this very dining room. This investor is currently managing a massive commercial real estate portfolio, and they are personally coming to finalize a massive funding deal for Preston's new tech firm. This is legacy-building wealth, Julian. I almost laughed out loud. The sheer audacity was staggering. Preston was actually trying to pull off a massive, fabricated performance for his captive audience. He had likely hired a cheap actor or convinced one of his sleazy, failed business buddies to show up in a rented suit. He needed someone to pretend to be an investor just to solidify his golden child status in front of our parents and Aunt Beatrice. He desperately needed to secure his continued access to their bank accounts, and he needed a grand, theatrical spectacle to do it. An angel investor, I repeated slowly, letting the heavy words hang in the tense air of the dining room. Coming here, on a Sunday night, to a suburban dining room, to fund your company. That is exactly right, Preston sneered, puffing out his chest, completely missing the sarcasm lacing my tone. Someone who actually recognizes true talent and visionary leadership. Someone with real, liquid money. Not the fake, desperate kind of money you pretend to have. When they arrive, Julian, I want you to sit there, keep your mouth completely shut, and watch how high-level corporate deals are executed. Maybe you will actually learn something useful for once in your miserable, failing life. I picked up my silver fork, cut a small piece of the roast and took a slow bite. It tasted like absolute ash in my mouth, dry and bitter, but I chewed it slowly, maintaining direct, unwavering eye contact with my brother. I am really looking forward to meeting this mysterious investor, Preston. I truly, honestly am. The trap was fully set. They thought they had backed me into an inescapable corner. They thought they were about to witness the ultimate, glorious coronation of the golden child and the absolute, crushing destruction of the shadow. They were so incredibly blind, so deeply suffocated by their own toxic delusions and manufactured lies, that they could not see the massive, catastrophic freight train speeding directly toward them in the dark. Exactly 20 minutes later, just as Aunt Beatrice was launching into another long, agonizing, highly critical monologue about how my lack of ambition was clearly a genetic defect from my father's side of the family, the heavy brass knocker on the front door echoed loudly through the house. The entire dining room went dead silent. The tension was thick enough to slice with a steak knife. Preston immediately shot up from his chair like he had been electrified. He violently smoothed down the lapels of his expensive blazer, checked his reflection in the glass doors of my mother's antique china cabinet, and plastered on his most charming, overly confident business smile. "They are here," Preston announced, his voice trembling just slightly with nervous adrenaline. "Everyone, Please be on your absolute best behavior. Do not speak unless spoken to. This deal is going to change our entire family's financial future forever. This is the big leagues. My parents sat up perfectly straight, their faces glowing with absolute, undeniable pride. My father adjusted his tie. My mother patted her hair. Aunt Beatrice folded her hands neatly in her lap, looking at the hallway with eager, greedy anticipation. I just sat there in my chair near the kitchen door, my heart beating a slow, steady, powerful rhythm against my ribs. I knew exactly what was about to happen, and the sheer anticipation of the impending carnage was completely intoxicating. Preston practically sprinted down the hallway to the foyer. We heard the heavy oak front door creak open. We heard Preston's loud, booming, fake enthusiastic voice echoing off the walls. "Welcome. It is an absolute honor to have you in our home this evening. Please, come right this way into the dining room. My family is so incredibly eager to meet the visionary who is backing my enterprise." Footsteps echoed sharply on the hardwood floor, slow, deliberate, and clicking with the unmistakable, authoritative sound of expensive designer heels. Preston walked backward into the dining room, gesturing grandly with his arm like a game show host revealing the grand prize behind a curtain. "Mom, Dad, Aunt Beatrice, I would like to formally introduce you to the lead investor of the—" Preston's words died violently in his throat. He completely choked on his own breath. The color drained from his face so fast he looked physically ill. Stepping through the arched doorway, looking like an absolute, undeniable force of nature in a tailored, jet-black designer suit, was Victoria, the tech billionaire, the woman from the luxury watch boutique. Preston's face lost every single drop of arrogance. He looked like he had just seen a demon walk through the wall, his jaw practically unhinged, hanging open in silent terror. He stood there, completely frozen, his arms still awkwardly suspended in the air. My parents and Aunt Beatrice, completely oblivious to the sheer, unfiltered panic radiating from Preston, stood up immediately to greet the guest. My father extended his hand across the mahogany table, putting on his best patriarchal smile. "Welcome, welcome. We have heard so much about your intense interest in our son's brilliant tech company. I am Richard, Preston's father. Please have a seat." Victoria did not even look at my father. She did not take his outstretched hand. She stood at the head of the table, her piercing, icy gray gaze locked entirely on Preston. The silence in the room became so incredibly heavy you could physically choke on it. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. "Preston," Victoria said, her voice dripping with absolute, unfiltered disgust. "When I told my executive assistant to contact you and schedule a meeting at your primary residence regarding a commercial real estate investment, you actually thought I was coming here to hand you a check. You actually thought, in your deeply delusional mind, that I was going to fund your pathetic, hollow shell of a company." Preston began to stammer uncontrollably. The smooth businessman act completely dissolved. I, Ms. Victoria, I assumed, my business plan, the projections I sent. Your business plan is an absolute, undeniable joke." Victoria cut him off, her voice cracking like a whip through the silent room. "After the highly disturbing, violent incident I personally witnessed downtown earlier this week, I had my personal legal team run a comprehensive, deep-dive background check on you and your LLC. You have absolutely no assets. You have 0 active clients. Your company is nothing but a mountain of hidden debt, leveraged entirely against what I assume are your parents' drained retirement accounts. You are a complete fraud. And the fact that you thought I would ever do business with a man who publicly assaults his own family members shows that you are not just a fraud, you are completely out of touch with reality." My mother let out a loud, highly dramatic gasp. She grabbed the edge of the dining table with both hands to steady herself, her knuckles turning white. What incident? What assault? What on earth are you talking about? Preston is a gentleman." Victoria finally tore her fierce gaze away from the broken, trembling shell of my brother and looked directly at me. The ice in her eyes instantly melted, replaced by a look of deep, professional respect. She walked past Preston as if he were a piece of garbage discarded on the sidewalk and stopped right next to my chair. She reached into her sleek leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, heavy legal folder bound with a gold corporate seal. She placed it gently on the table right in front of me. "Julian," Victoria said, her voice clear and carrying perfectly to every corner of the silent, shocked room. "My board of directors spent the entire weekend reviewing the comprehensive design portfolio you submitted. They were absolutely blown away by your talent. Your vision for sustainable commercial real estate is exactly what my company needs to dominate the market in the next decade." She tapped the heavy legal folder with her manicured finger. "Inside this folder is a formal, binding employment contract. I am officially offering you the position of Senior Director of Commercial Real Estate Design at my firm. It comes with a starting salary that is exactly 4 times what your current, corrupt boss is paying you. It includes a massive signing bonus, full corporate stock options, and complete creative control over our 3 new tech campuses. We want you, Julian. We want your brilliance." Aunt Beatrice's crystal wine glass slipped from her trembling fingers. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered into 100 jagged pieces, the dark red wine bleeding across the expensive Persian rug like a wound. Nobody even moved to clean it up. Nobody even flinched. My father was staring at the thick contract on the table, his eyes wide with absolute, world-shattering disbelief. "For times, his salary? Senior Director? Julian?" He looked at me as if I were a complete stranger who had just broken into his house and stolen his reality. I looked up at Victoria and smiled warmly, ignoring my family entirely. "I accept the offer, Victoria. I will have my lawyer review the specific paperwork in the morning, but I am absolutely thrilled to join your team and start building." Victoria smiled back, a genuine smile of partnership. "Excellent. I will have my legal team handle the entire transition. And Julian, if your former employer, Gregory, tries to withhold any of your intellectual property or threatens you in any way, do not worry. My corporate lawyers will bury him in a lawsuit so massive he will be completely bankrupt before Thanksgiving. We protect our own." She turned slowly, her expensive heels pivoting sharply on the hardwood floor, and faced my deeply shocked, paralyzed family one last time. She looked at Preston, who was now sweating profusely, breathing heavily, completely and utterly exposed to the light. "Oh, and Preston," Victoria said, her voice completely devoid of any human emotion, "you should probably check your phone. When I was running your background check, I happened to speak with a highly prominent lawyer who represents the family of a woman named Vanessa. They were very interested to hear about your violent tendencies in public spaces. I believe they are currently filing a massive civil lawsuit against you for attempting to defraud them with a fake prenuptial agreement. Enjoy the rest of your miserable evening." Without another word, Victoria walked out of the dining room, down the long hallway, and out the front door. We heard the heavy doors of her Rolls-Royce slam shut in the driveway, and the powerful, quiet engine purr as it glided seamlessly out into the night. The suffocating silence that followed Victoria's dramatic departure was not just quiet. It was completely catastrophic. It was the heavy, crushing sound of a carefully constructed, 28-year-old delusion completely imploding on itself. Preston collapsed heavily into his chair. His legs simply gave out. He pulled his smartphone out of his blazer pocket with shaking, violently trembling hands. His screen was completely illuminated with a flood of urgent notifications. I sat quietly and watched his face contort in absolute, unfiltered horror as he read the incoming emails from Vanessa's aggressive legal team. The engagement was completely, officially over. There would be no society wedding. She was legally demanding the highly expensive engagement ring back immediately, and her father, a man with immense resources, was threatening a massive lawsuit for financial fraud regarding the business loans he had secured. The golden child was entirely, hopelessly ruined in a matter of seconds. My mother, true to her deeply toxic, manipulative nature, immediately tried to pivot. The dark survival instinct of a lifelong manipulator kicked in. She wiped a fake, dramatic tear from her eye, walked quickly around the table, stepping right over the shattered glass of Aunt Beatrice's wine, and tried to place a loving, motherly hand on my shoulder. "Julian," she said, her voice dripping with sudden, sickeningly sweet desperation. "Julian, honey, this is absolutely incredible news. A senior director. We always knew you had a bright creative spark in you. We always believed in you deep down. But Julian, you heard what that terrifying woman just said about poor Preston. He is in terrible trouble. Vanessa's family is going to destroy him in court. Since you are going to be making so much incredible money now, and since you clearly have such a close, personal relationship with this billionaire, you need to step up and help your brother. You need to pay for his defense lawyer. You need to ask Victoria to give him a high-paying executive job at her company to save his reputation." I stood up slowly from the table. I did not aggressively brush her hand off my shoulder. I just stepped backward, letting her arm fall away awkwardly into empty space. I looked at my mother, my father, Aunt Beatrice, and the broken, sobbing mess that was my older brother. "No," I said. The single word was incredibly simple, but it carried the immense weight of 1,000 locked doors finally clicking shut. My father's face hardened. He tried to summon his old, booming, patriarchal authority, the voice he used to terrify me as a child. "Julian, you will not turn your back on this family in a time of crisis. Blood is thicker than water. Your brother needs you right now. You will share this new wealth, and you will protect this family's reputation from ruin." "This family does not have a reputation," I replied, my voice completely cold and entirely unshakable. "This family has a disease, a deep, rotting sickness, and I am finally curing myself of it tonight." I picked up the heavy legal folder from the table and held it securely against my chest like a shield. "For 28 years, you treated me like absolute garbage. You funded Preston's entire fraudulent life while I worked grueling minimum wage jobs just to buy my own winter coats. You listened to Aunt Beatrice whisper toxic poison in your ears because you loved the drama more than you loved your own son. And when my boss, Gregory, called you and lied to you about me getting fired, you did not call to check on me. You did not ask if I was okay. You used it as a weapon. You used it as an excuse to ambush me here tonight and let Preston bully me. You desperately wanted me to fail so Preston could look like a winner." "That is not true," my mother wailed loudly, gripping the back of a wooden chair for support. "We love you equally. You are our son." "Stop lying to yourselves," I said firmly, shutting her down completely. "I am walking out that door. I am taking this contract. I am taking my new life. I will never pay a single cent of Preston's massive debts. I will never answer another phone call from this toxic house. If any of you try to contact my new employer, or if you show up at my apartment, I will personally hire the best lawyer in this state and file a restraining order against all of you." I turned my back on them and walked down the long hallway. I opened the heavy front door and stepped out into the cool, refreshing night air. I did not look back. I got into my old sedan, put the key in the ignition, and drove away from that house, leaving them to drown in the consequences of their own actions. 6 months passed. A massive, beautiful time jump into an entirely new reality. My life completely transformed in ways I could never have imagined. I moved out of my cramped, depressing space and into a stunning, high-rise luxury apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city skyline. I was thriving in my new role at Victoria's company. I was deeply respected by my team, my architectural ideas were heavily funded without question, and I was finally earning the massive salary I had worked so incredibly hard for. Meanwhile, bitter karma finally caught up with Gregory. The very day I formally resigned from his firm, I legally took all of my original architectural designs and blueprints with me. Without my foundational work, Gregory's firm could not deliver on the massive corporate headquarters project he had stolen from me. The angry clients pulled their funding immediately and filed a devastating, multi-million-dollar lawsuit against him for breach of contract and intellectual property theft. The firm went entirely bankrupt. Gregory lost his leased sports car, his expensive tailored suits, and his entire professional reputation in the industry. He was ruined. I thought I had completely closed the book on my dark past. But the universe always has one final, brutal plot twist waiting in the wings. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was walking through the expansive, marble-floored lobby of my new luxury apartment building after a long, highly successful day at the corporate office. The building concierge, a polite, discreet man named Thomas, waved me over to the front desk. "Mr. Julian," Thomas whispered, looking slightly uncomfortable. "There are two older individuals waiting for you in the private guest lounge. They claim to be your parents. I told them they could not go up to your penthouse without your explicit permission, but they flatly refused to leave the premises. Should I call building security to escort them out?" I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. I looked over toward the guest lounge. Sitting on a velvet sofa, looking entirely out of place among the modern art and expensive decor, were Diana and Richard. They looked absolutely terrible. They had aged 10 years in the span of 6 short months. My father was wearing a deeply wrinkled shirt, his posture completely slumped, the arrogance completely erased from his features. My mother was clutching a cheap, worn handbag, her eyes red, bloodshot, and severely swollen from crying. I walked over to them slowly. I did not sit down on the sofa. I stood tall, looking down at the two people who had made my childhood a living hell. "Julian," my mother gasped, standing up quickly. She reached out, but I took a deliberate step back, establishing a hard, physical boundary. "Julian, please, you have to listen to us. We have nowhere else to go. You have exactly 3 minutes before I have security physically escort you out of this building," I said, my voice completely devoid of warmth. "Speak." My father rubbed his face with violently trembling hands. "It is your Aunt Beatrice," he choked out, his voice cracking with absolute despair. She completely destroyed us. We have nothing." The final, sickening truth finally spilled out onto the marble floor of the lobby. After Vanessa's wealthy family filed their massive lawsuit against Preston, my parents were utterly desperate to save the golden child from going to federal prison for financial fraud. Aunt Beatrice swooped in immediately, expertly playing the role of the loving, highly supportive sister. She convinced my parents that the absolute only way to protect their remaining assets from the impending lawsuit was to temporarily transfer all of their funds. She told them to move their inheritance, what was left of the college fund, and their entire 401k retirement accounts into a highly secure, private offshore trust managed exclusively by her son. They signed the legal paperwork. In their blind panic to save Preston, they handed over everything. And the very next morning, Aunt Beatrice and her son completely vanished without a trace. They drained the accounts completely dry. They secretly sold their house. They took every single penny my parents had saved for their entire lives, their inheritance, everything, and fled the state. The secure trust was a complete, fabricated scam. Beatrice had spent decades systematically isolating my mother, filling her head with toxic poison against me, simply to ensure she had absolute, uncontested control over their finances when the time was perfectly right to strike. She played the long game and she won. "We lost everything," my mother sobbed openly, heavy tears streaming down her deeply lined face. "The house is currently being foreclosed on by the bank. We cannot afford a lawyer. Preston is living in a cheap, dirty motel on the edge of town and working the night shift at a gas station to pay off his debts. The lawyers took the rest. We are completely bankrupt, Julian. We were so incredibly wrong about Beatrice. We were so wrong about you. Please, son. You live in this beautiful building. You make so much money now. Can we just stay in your guest room? Just until we get back on our feet." I looked at them. I saw the absolute crushing terror in their eyes. I saw the massive weight of their own terrible, toxic decisions collapsing directly onto their shoulders. For a brief, fleeting moment, the old Julian, the deeply programmed, abused child, wanted to say yes. He wanted to buy their love by saving them from total ruin. He wanted to fix it. But I looked down at my left wrist. The heavy, beautiful luxury watch was gleaming under the bright lobby lights. "I am truly sorry that you were brutally betrayed by someone you implicitly trusted," I said softly, but with absolute, unwavering firmness. It is a terrible, deeply painful feeling to have your family steal from you. I know exactly how that feels, because you both did the exact same thing to my spirit for 28 years. Julian, please, we are your parents, my father begged, his voice echoing slightly in the empty lobby. We will end up on the street. You chose Preston. You chose Beatrice. You made your bed, and now you have to sleep in it. I continued, turning my back to them completely. Do not ever come to this building again. You are not my family. You are just people I used to know. I walked away. I walked over to the private elevator, stepped inside, and swiped my secure access card. The heavy metal doors slid shut, completely blocking out the sound of my mother's desperate crying. As the elevator shot upward toward my penthouse, I felt a massive, invisible weight completely lift off my chest. I was entirely, completely free. The watch on my wrist was never just a piece of metal and glass. It was the ultimate catalyst. It was the physical manifestation of the exact moment I realized my own undeniable worth. It was the exact moment I stopped living in the cold, dark shadow of a brother who was nothing but a fragile, toxic illusion. Sometimes the universe has to break your entire world apart just so you can finally build something beautiful from the absolute wreckage. I had to face the absolute worst of human nature, entirely from the people who were supposed to protect me, to finally find my own immense strength. I am Julian. I am a senior director. I am a survivor. And I will never, ever apologize for taking up space in this world again. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to cut off the people closest to you to save your own sanity and your own life? Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey.